Night gathers softly over an abandoned runway where the wind carries the faint scent of rain and old aviation fuel. In the half-light, a lone motorcycle stands beneath a flickering maintenance lamp, its chrome catching shards of silver from the restless sky. The Matchless G45 is no ordinary silhouette. It feels like a held breath, a pause between the past and what might have been. The metal lines along its tank glow like the ribs of a silent creature waiting to be awakened. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the distant roar of open megaphones, the footfalls of mechanics running in the dark, the pulse of an engine tuned for war, yet destined for speed. The G45 does not simply rest, it waits, like a memory not yet ready to fade. When the Matchless G45 first emerged in 1951, Britain was still crawling out from the long shadow of wartime austerity. Ration books lingered. Factories rebuilt themselves piece by piece. Yet Grand Prix racing returned with the same sharp hunger it had carried before the world was torn apart. The Isle of Man TT roared again. Airfields became circuits, and motorcycle manufacturers, scarred, underfunded but unbroken, raced not only for trophies but for proof that their industries still had a heartbeat. AMC, the parent of Matchless, and AJS, was especially desperate to reclaim its throne. Their jewel, the AJS Porcupine, had dazzled in theory but faltered in practice, complex, sensitive, and ultimately overwhelmed by the changing pace of early 1950s racing. What AMC needed was not a miracle, it needed a fighter. Thus the G45 was born, a purpose-built 500cc racer pieced together with ingenuity rather than luxury. It borrowed the bones of the AJS 7R's trusted architecture but added the raw authority of a vertical twin, meant to battle Norton's featherbed legends and the rising Italian multi-cylinder wave. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't refined, but it was determined. The G45 entered its first seasons not as a polished champion, but as a contender, forged from necessity. Riders spoke of its strong, honest pull down the straights, its stubborn resilience on rough surfaces, and a mechanical simplicity that could be coaxed back to life even after a punishing practice session. The motorcycle magazines of the time wrote of a machine more courageous than clever, a racer built not for elegance, but survival. And survival mattered. In an era when even the best machines crackled, seized, or snapped under the relentless strain of the world's most dangerous courses, the Matchless G45 carved its identity by enduring what others could not. It was a machine that reflected the nation around it, bruised, rebuilding, but never conceding. To understand the Matchless G45, you must step deeper into the world that produced it, a Britain suspended between the exhaustion of recovery and the restless ambition of a new technological age. The early 1950s were marked by contrasts. Factories still carried dust from wartime production, yet drafting tables filled with bold new sketches. Streets remained quiet from rationing, yet race paddocks erupted with the fierce chant of engines warming at dawn. Motorcycle magazines of the era described the nation as a workshop lit by hope, and within that light, AMC sought a path back to glory. The G45's arrival reflected this climate of compromise and courage. Unlike the Italian factories, Gilera, MV Agusta, Moto Guzzi, whose racing departments swelled with engineers and funding, AMC worked with restraint. Their tools were familiar steels, carryover castings, and practical British design principles. But within these limits, a kind of purposeful creativity thrived. They knew they could not outspend their rivals. Instead, they aimed to outlast them. The twin-cylinder engine of the G45 embodied this philosophy. Built upon the trusted temperament of AMC's earlier designs, it was neither experimental nor extravagant. Separate barrels, solid rocker gear, and a crankcase that favored durability over delicacy. This was an engine meant for long battles, not fragile bursts of brilliance. Tuning was meticulous. Carburation was sharpened with careful hands rather than factory extravagance. Journalists noted that at high revs, the motor delivered a confident surge, as if aware of the weight placed upon it. Its chassis, a sturdy steel structure, carried the imprint of an era still learning the language of agility. While the Norton Featherbed introduced a new vocabulary of poise and cornering grace, the G45's frame reflected older sensibilities, strong, predictable, occasionally stiff-willed. Riders spoke of its honesty, a machine that demanded effort but rewarded those who understood its rhythm. It didn't carve lines, it commanded them. All across Britain's circuits, Snetterton with its flat winds, Silverstone with its sweeping arcs, Oulton Park still settling into its place on the map. The G45 appeared as a dependable companion for privateers. Unlike factory-backed stars who rode the latest Italian marvels, these independent racers often worked from modest garages, tuning their machines by lamplight, guided by instinct and borrowed tools. For them, the G45 was liberation. It was accessible, serviceable, and most importantly, it finished races. And in that era, finishing was half the battle. Circuits were unforgiving, patched and scarred from the war, strewn with bumps that could break a weaker frame or drain a delicate engine. Spectators, lined behind rope and wooden rails, watched as machines fought the track more than each other. Among these challenges, the G45 slowly carved its reputation, not as the fastest, but as one of the most steadfast British warriors of its time. If the early chapters of the G45 story were shaped by necessity and perseverance, then its engineering stood as a testament to AMC's quiet defiance. The Matchless G45 was not built to dazzle with extravagance. It was built to endure the violence of racing. And inside that modest ambition lay a kind of mechanical poetry, subtle, unassuming, but undeniably alive. At the heart of the machine beat its 498 cubic centimeters vertical twin, a power plant whose architecture traced familiar British lines yet carried an urgency that surprised even seasoned riders. Fed by matched Amal carburetors and breathing through raw, unbaffled megaphone exhausts, the G45's voice was harsh, metallic, unmistakable. Mechanics often described its power delivery as honest, a word that appeared repeatedly in race reports of the time. It did not surge unpredictably or flirt with disaster. Instead, it built its power in a perfectly linear climb, as though urging the rider onward with steady determination. That linearity became one of the G45's greatest strengths on demanding circuits, where rivals relied on razor-edge tuning that sometimes bordered on fragility. The Matchless twin rarely faltered. Its crankshaft was robust, its lubrication system simple and reliable, and its cooling, though hardly groundbreaking, proved adequate even in the punishing stress of long-distance events. Riders spoke fondly of the way the G45 kept its composure during extended climbs or full-throttle straights, its engine temperature rising predictably rather than erratically. In a time when heat was often a race-ending enemy, this predictability became a quiet advantage. Yet engineering is never only about engines. Beneath the tank, the G45 carried a steel duplex cradle frame that bore the character of its lineage: strong, somewhat conservative, but trustworthy. Critics pointed out its limitations. It lacked the surreal fluidity of the Norton featherbed, whose geometry had begun to redefine British handling standards. The G45 required more physical persuasion, a firm shoulder, a confident lean, a rider willing to work with its weight distribution rather than against it. But once mastered, it revealed a stable, consistent nature that privateers admired. It was a machine that did not surprise you mid-corner. It simply held its line with unwavering loyalty. Braking, provided by full-width alloy hubs, delivered respectable performance for the era. Though not as progressive as some Italian counterparts, the G45's stopping power was reliable, even under repeated abuse. Test riders noted slight fade during grueling races, but it remained manageable, a testament to AMC's methodical approach to component selection. Then there were the details often overlooked by history, but adored by those who lived beside the machine. The quick-access tappet, covers that made trackside adjustments a matter of minutes, the clean, purposeful routing of cables, the beautifully hammered alloy fuel tank that held just enough capacity for endurance without unnecessary weight. Each element, though modest, revealed a machine crafted for practicality in an unforgiving sport. In the sum of its engineering, the Matchless G45 embodied a philosophy that contrasted sharply with the flamboyance rising across Europe. It wasn't a masterpiece of innovation. It was a masterpiece of resolve. But every machine, no matter how faithful, must eventually confront the storms that shape its fate. For the Matchless G45, the fiercest of these storms came not from the circuits of Britain, but from abroad. By the mid-1950s, the Italian factories had turned racing into a symphony of precision and ambition. 4-cylinder engines, from Gilera and MV Agusta, howled with a refinement that no British twin, no matter how courageous, could match. Their technical departments swelled with specialists. Their frames grew lighter, sharper. Their power soared beyond what the G45's architecture could reasonably chase. On British soil, Norton's featherbed racers continued to evolve with relentless discipline, carving out recalcitrant corners with a grace the G45 could not fully emulate. The matchless twin still fought with its dependable heart, but the world around it had begun to accelerate beyond the pace of its design. By 1955, the gap had widened. By 1957, it had become a chasm. Yet despite the mounting pressure, the G45 refused to disappear quietly. Privateers continued to run it with stubborn pride, keeping the sound of its open megaphones alive in the damp mornings of Snetterton and the sweeping lines of Dundrod. Race reports described it as a veteran holding the line, a machine whose spirit outlived its competitiveness. Even as lap records fell to younger, faster machines, the G45 remained a fixture in the paddock, its metal warm from effort, its tank still bearing the subtle hammer marks of craftsmen who believed a motorcycle should be touched as much as engineered. But time is a ruthless editor. When AMC shifted focus toward other developments, most notably the G50 single, which would go on to find greater success, the G45 slipped into the quiet margins of history. Production tapered, then ceased altogether in 1958. No grand farewell. No ceremonial last victory, just a gradual dimming, like a lamp slowly burning down its final wick. Machines were sold off to privateers, traded between clubs, or slipped into sheds where dust settled gently over their tanks. One by one, they left the stage. And yet, in the decades that followed, something unexpected happened. The G45 began to gather gravity again, not as a champion, but as a relic of a vanishing era. Collectors sought it for its rarity. Historians admired its resilience. Restored examples appeared at classic meetings, where the old twin once again cleared its throat in the cold air, its sound unmistakable even among machines far younger and faster. Riders described it as a bridge, linking the cautious post-war years to the dawn of modern racing. A reminder that progress is not only measured in speed, but in the courage of those who strive against their limits. Today, when a Matchless G45 rolls onto a circuit during vintage demonstrations, it carries with it the weight of all those mornings long gone, the hurried footsteps of mechanics, the damp smell of fuel-soaked pit lanes, the quiet determination of privateers who asked for nothing but the chance to race. The G45 never claimed a throne, but it claimed something else, something quieter, something enduring. The respect owed to a machine that held the line long after others had surrendered. If this story still lingers within you, leave a calm word below. A like, a subscription. Sometimes, that's all it takes to keep old legends alive a little longer.